Holy cow, folks, did we just solve a 70-year-old murder in Australia? Betty Shanks is the oldest cold case murder investigation in Queensland, and you're not going to believe the phone call I received while sitting in a Los Angeles airport. The caller, he said, "Mr. King, my father killed Betty Shanks." Well, welcome to Profiling Evil. I hope you're going to take a minute as we get rolling and pound that like and subscribe button and ring the bell so that you get all of our notifications on our released videos. And don't forget to check out our channel memberships where you get a little bit more information before anybody else. It was late on the evening of September 19th, 1952, 70 years ago, when Betty Shanks stepped off the train at the Grange terminus. She crossed the street and walked down a poorly lit Brisbane neighborhood, just like she'd done 100 times before. This was her neighborhood, and while she knew every nook and cranny, she also was smart enough to cross the streets as she neared a darkened open area, taking advantage of one of the few streetlights at the corner of Thomas Street and Carberry. Betty was a student at the University of Queensland, and she had just finished an evening class before boarding the train. Now, before she did, though, she and two other male students accepted a ride from their instructor. He took them to the train terminal. Betty exited the vehicle to catch her train, which is located about half the distance between the school and Betty's final stop, her neighborhood. As she neared the corner of Thomas Street and Carberry, Betty was viciously attacked, thrown into the backyard of a home, and some people believe sexually assaulted by the predator before being beaten to death by blunt force trauma, presumably the assailant's fists and feet. Well, this began one of Australia's largest police dragnets, and it changed the way Brisbane residents felt about their own safety. The reward for Betty's killer still remains at $50,000. You know, I became interested in Betty's case while I was working with Queensland Police on the G20 summit back in 2014. 5 years later, 2019, on a subsequent visit to Australia, I was interviewed by the Australian Broadcasting Channel about a number of law enforcement initiatives that were going on, and in that interview, the question of Betty Shanks' case came up. The reporter asked me what I thought about this case and how I thought life could be breathed back into what was then Australia's coldest murder case. Let's watch that interchange. What I do think is important is that we start to look at some behaviors from a geography standpoint that suspects and victims have to come together in space and time somewhere. And then we start thinking about what is that site where the crime occurred? And that could be a site where she's grabbed and dragged into the bushes where she eventually is found. Or she's hit by a motorcycle and thrown further down the roadway and then either crawls or is dragged into the yard where she is. I think it's less likely that if it was the motorcycle that she was thrown over the bushes and into the backyard. And then we start thinking about the place where her body's finally discovered. We would call that the disposal site. What's the likelihood that the soldier with the boot can cause the kind of trauma? That would take a tremendous kick if what I read in the reports was right, that her teeth are dislodged completely from her body. or an assault at one location that dislodges the teeth and then the body moved to a different location. Then you start saying, okay, but let's look at the lifestyle of the individual, and we start to wonder, well, then what's the motivation for this? Well, over the years since Betty's murder, several theories were pursued by police and the true crime community who just jumped on this case. The most popular theory at the time of the murder was that a soldier who was on assignment in the area committed the homicide. It focused on facts that suggested that there was this cadre of soldiers on short-term assignment in town. The link of the soldiers to Betty centered around her injuries. One, which appeared to be a well-defined blunt force injury that appeared to be from the boot, and many people assume the boot of an army soldier. As speculation swirled around the members of the armed forces, someone also came up with this theory that the boot mark looked more like the kind of boot worn by police motorcycle riders. Now, I rode motors in my police career. That one jumped out at me, and I studied that injury, and I just don't quite get it. But here's the theory. The theory suggested that a police officer heading home after a long day on the job mistakenly hit Betty Shanks while she was crossing the street, knocking her into the yard. Well, in an effort to hide the crime, this theory suggests that the officer returned back to the crime scene where he murdered her to keep her from identifying him. Another theory swirled around a local physician. People speculated he was involved with Betty and killed her to avoid it becoming known. Now, that doctor killed himself within a few days of Betty's death, prompting many to believe that he did so because of his overwhelming grief at committing the homicide. Then there was the theory by the daughter of a man who worked as a locksmith in the area, a guy who had worked on the Shanks home just before the murders. The suspect's daughter claims that her father killed Betty to hide a relationship that the two of them were having. Well, in my interview with ABC Television, I mentioned that oftentimes these cold cases can be invigorated when somebody who knows something gains the courage to tell police what they've kept confidential for decades. They get the courage and they finally say, I've got to say something. You know, we spoke of the enhancements to forensics, and we concluded our conversation with me pleading with the people of Australia that if you know something about Betty Shanks' murder, please reach out to the Queensland Police Department immediately, the Queensland Police Service. And with that, we said our goodbyes, and I caught my Delta flight back to the United States. As I disembarked that nearly 14-hour flight in Los Angeles, I turned on my phone, and the messages started to roll in. I had a 2-hour layover before my final connection home, so I started listening to the voicemails. And the very first voicemail was from a man who said, quote, I listened to your interview on ABC, and I need to tell you, my father killed Betty Shanks. Well, folks, I put the link to Mapping Evil Season 1 and Season 2 down below. This is a project that I've been doing with Esri Australia in all of Southeast Asia, and I've been doing it alongside of this brilliant broadcaster who's so well known across the region named Tori Shepard. Season 2 is only 4 episodes long, and we're going to release them all on the anniversary of Betty's murder, September 19th. That was 70 years ago, so just a couple of days from now, we're going to launch all 4 of them. You can sign up for the notifications on that by going to mappingevil.com. There, you're going to go back to Season 1. You can catch what my original episodes were about, including this really cool overview of Betty's case, a brief story to set the stage. And while you're there, I hope you enjoy listening to the other broadcasts from last year. But then you get to sign up for Mapping Evil Season 2, the Betty Shanks story. Mapping Evil with Mike King is a production of Esri Australia. They're the world leader in GIS mapping. I have the privilege of leading Esri's emergency communications practice around the world. You all know that I love maps, and now you know a little bit more about me. In fact, Esri has a special webpage that helps you learn a little bit more about me if you want, and it's there that you might just find one of my favorite recipes. I've talked about it before, and I did it based on an interview I had with Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker. My recipe favorite? It's prison lasagna. You got to check it out at www.mike-king.com.au. Now, please consider joining Profiling Evil on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And you can visit our website at profilingevil.com, where you can sign up for our free digital newsletter, the B.O.L.O. B.O.L.O stands for Be on the Lookout. And rest assured, folks, we're never going to share your email address. And keep in mind, you can listen to Profiling Evil's podcasts on your favorite podcast platform. This year, we've been focusing on cults among us. I think you'd learn a lot by subscribing, and I want to say thanks so much for your support. We'll see you soon at the next crime scene.